into some coaching skills. Okay, so here's our handy dandy little chart again. So one of the big components of, elements of health coaching is the skills that we're going to use when we work with our clients. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start with presencing. Again, we have already talked about this over and over again, the importance of being mindful, the importance of being present with our client. And so this is just a lovely quote. The most precious gift we can offer to others is our presence. And it's so true. Most of the time, those that we're with, what's happening is really insignificant compared to just the fact that we're being together, right? And so when we can be fully present, that is truly felt. So presencing is a huge, huge component. It's really more about how to be with your client. How we are being with that client is really equally as important as what we do with them, if not more important. And so it's a huge component. What you gain through that connection is irreplaceable. And that starts from, the moment you guys sit down together. And that connection is what's really going to drive that coaching process. Empathy, warmth, that's what the coaching relationship is going to be all about. And what data really has shown us that when you look at, I don't know if this was from addiction. I think this is addiction data. But what they found is that when there is empathy and warmth in the coaching relationship, that actually has better predictive outcomes and positive outcomes than when that's not present. So that's telling us that really that empathy is so, so important to the relationship. So what does it mean to be fully present? We're going to eliminate all the distractions, both physical and mental. And this is a big piece of it. In order to be fully present, we really do need to be mentally present. And this is where if you've had a hectic day and you're rushing in, you've got this person coming in to maybe just sit and do a few breathing exercises or just to sit and have a moment of mindfulness can really help eliminate a lot of those mental distractions that may come along. There may be an instance where you have just gotten a phone call and, oh my gosh, my sister's been in an auto accident. And sometimes at that point, it's okay to let them know, hey, we maybe need to reschedule this. I am not going to be in a state where I can mentally be present for you. Let's talk about some other options for appointment time. So we really do want to be fully present. Physically looks like undivided attention. Again, we're really going to kind of shy away from taking notes, shuffling papers, checking our time. If we're all wearing these watches and they're buzzing the whole time, maybe it means we just take it off while we have a coaching session going on so that we're not tempted to really kind of look in and see that. I think we talked about the taking notes last time. This is a big one, and particularly when you're in the medical world, or even if you're just used to this, you're checking in with someone, taking those notes. And it really can be a distraction. It can be a distraction on our end, and it can certainly be a distraction on their end. So to just trust yourself, let it go. It's okay. You're going to remember the important things that need to be remembered.
And the good thing, I'm going to jump in, one of the good things about being virtual is there have been a couple of times, don't be mad, okay?
I hear you. No, I hear you.
There have been a couple of times where, can you see if I'm writing something right here? No. So there have been a couple of times where I have, and you don't have to, you don't have to see what you're writing to know you're writing that word. I have done that. Like, I want to remember to write some notes about this. So virtually, I have made words below where they could see without breaking eye contact. Just real quick, one word.
Yes.
To remind me.
Yes.
I know it's not the best coaching technique.
Because what did we talk about last time?
But I'm still, okay, she's been coaching forever, and I'm still, an apprentice. So, so I occasionally have to break her rule of no notes.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
It's a confession.
Again, we don't want them, right. But when you can, I hate to use the words get away with it, but
Right, right.
If it comes down to just writing like one little X on your paper to remember, it's okay. And to some degree, they want to know that we care enough to take note of what's being said.
Right.
So there is a fine line between it. There is a fine line.
Yeah.
We just don't want to get to the point where we're so consumed with what we're trying to write down or secretly write down that we have now lost our connection of presencing.
Right. And listening, because
Yes.
if I do try to write, I can't write and listen to Beth at the same time.
Right.
So you don't, it does.
And we think we can.
break
Like,
that.
how often have you been in like a continuing education session and you're like writing down and then you think, oh my gosh, well now I just missed this whole other thing
Yeah.
that they said.
Yeah.
Our brains really can't do two things at one time.
We just try to switch between them really fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so we're going to be open-minded. Again, that non-judgmental mindset. This is really taking things and examining them from all sides because, again, we're going to want to categorize it kind of to our values and our beliefs. We really have to be intentional about allowing what's out there to be the client's belief, the client's values, and really appreciating that and not letting our lens get in the way of us being open-minded. And when we become open-minded, we really do open the door to so many more possibilities because when we don't have an assumption already at hand and we're not judging something, then man, the sky's the limit. And that really allows that client to come out and we're not really kind of putting them in boxes because that can be so easy to do. And just being curious, coming in with that beginner's mind and just, the more we can be curious, again, the more we can really allow that client to bring forth what's important to them. Because again, we don't know their life experiences. We don't know what's important to them. And if we put them in a box, then when we talked about our directing and our guiding, we're going to be directing in a way that's not necessarily them. And so we always want to be looking through their lens so that we know we are asking the most evocative questions that is going to matter to them, not us. We're going to use eye contact, body language. This is where we talked about that mirroring. We really do want to kind of follow the mood, follow the tone of that client. We're going to listen for what's not being said. And so much of this you are going to get through their tone, their energy, those nonverbal cues. Just like Ray mentioned earlier when she had that client and every time she would say something, she just noticed that client kind of shut down a little bit. And that's where, when we talked about, kind of openly discussing some of that, that's where it can be our responsibility to step in and say, hey, I'm noticing that every time we speak of X, Y, and Z, you begin to lean back in your chair a little bit. And so that can just immediately open up the conversation. And then again, they know that you're vested in what's going on. And so if there is some kind of conflict, they're less intimidated to talk about it because we've just kind of put it out there in a way that, hey, this is what I'm noticing. Again, we're going to avoid interruptions, so we really do want to be in a quiet place. If we're Zooming from home, we want to kind of pay attention to, are the yard people coming today? Is
Don't
my
do it like I did
dog
today.
gonna be freaking out because I have the Amazon package coming today? So we do want to be aware of where we do those settings so that we're not dealing with all of the fun things that come along with, the awesomeness of being at home, yet the things that come along with being at home. So we just want to be aware of what may creep up so that we can really kind of, put a pause on some of those interruptions that might happen. Pacing is a big part. This is where we don't want to just be rushing the session. We don't want the session to kind of be all over the place. But we really want to be getting very comfortable with silence. And this is, again, as you begin coaching and you kind of start to coach, you're going to learn real quick, like what comes really easy and then what are some things is like, oh, this is
difficult for you.
This is hard for me. So I'm a busybody. Ray picks on me. I'm a jazz hands kind of girl. Like that's just my personality. So I will say the pregnant pause is tricky. It's hard. Like I like to talk and be there. And so It's so important, though. There is so much value that comes in just sitting with your client. Because what feels like silence to us is actually not silence. They're actually thinking. You know, they're going through the motions in their head. They're reflecting of what they said. They're thinking of the answer to potentially the question we just asked them. So when we allow that space and we allow that silence, we really do allow that person to grow. It can just be, it's not something we're good at. No one really teaches us, hey, let's give people some space. You know, we're just so consumed with filling the space. So pacing can be a big component to that. And again, we don't want to rush them either, because when we go to the doctor and we feel rushed, it kind of makes us feel icky, and it really starts to bring down that trust and rapport. So we want to respect a pace that is beneficial to that client and really allow space for silence and client reflection.
Yeah, this makes me also think okay, Joyce, yes. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah, that's fine. I think this fits in here. You know, there's a buzzword around about holding space. And I make an assumption of what I think that means, but could you talk a little bit about what that means in coaching, to hold space?
You wanna?
Well, I guess I was gonna even say, maybe it relates to what I was about to say too. And we refer to it as the pregnant pause, but I'll give you a scenario. Like sometimes I'll ask a client a question, and some people, well, everybody's got a different level of tolerance for silence and for two people to be together and there to be no words to be spoken. And within coaching, I think of holding space as different than if you just found out your friend lost a loved one or something. In coaching, I think of holding space as being a situation where I ask a client a question and they answer quickly with I don't know. I don't have to say another word. That's really just a space filler for them. That's really more like, well, I don't know in this moment. Give me a second to think about that. They just didn't say that second part. And so, or sometimes I'll just get a real quick answer and it's short and there's no real depth to the answer. And I can tell there wasn't, and they didn't give themselves a chance to even think about it. And so I'll just sit with it and just be quiet, even though they've given me a very short answer. And if I just sit there pleasantly waiting, they will think and come up with a response that has some deeper thought to it. So I think of coaching holding space is more like just knowing when to use a good pregnant pause, as opposed to when I hear holding space out in the world, I think of that as something a little different. But
yeah, no, that's a great answer. I mean, I would agree.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you allow that space, they feel the space to some degree. You know, they really, a lot of times they don't. They're thinking and they don't realize that it's there. Yet when we allow that space, it's almost as if we've put the microphone back on them, right? Like we're not going to answer this question for you. There's probably more there. And then there is, and they just keep talking. And so it really can blossom into this, rich discussion that if we had just jumped in, really may not have ever happened.
Yeah. A lot of times when you're talking to a friend or whatever, family member, whatever, conversations are like tennis games, and one person hits it and then the next person hits the ball, and it's back and forth like this. Coaching is not necessarily that way. It'll be a lot more hits from your client than you, the coach. In terms of going back to what you said earlier, in that video of empathy versus sympathy with Brene Brown talking, when the big creature, I don't know what it was it a bear?
It was a bear.
It was a bear, climbs down and says, you know what, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just glad you told me. That to me that's a holding space statement. Or at least that's like, I got nothing right now. I'm just going to zip it and just be here with you.
Yeah.
And I mean, and sometimes I feel like that's what happens in a coaching
Yeah, absolutely.
client relationship. You're just being there with them while they think through something for themselves, while they work it out. And maybe they talk it out, or maybe they think it out. And you'll know. You'll begin to learn your client and tell. And we give off clues when we're thinking, like with where our eyes go and things like that. You know when you're looking at somebody and talking to them, like, oh, they're thinking about this. That's when you just zip it and let them think.
Yeah. Yeah. So that brings us to presencing is a learned skill. You know, no one really teaches us this. And so one of the ways that we can get really good at being present is taking time to sit with ourselves. And so really developing that mindful awareness within ourselves. And then ultimately that results in a carryover so that we are able to really be mindful with our person. And this can be hard because our brains really are made to think and do. And, you know, we hear something over here and our first thing is like, we've already got a story going on. Oh, wow, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so to really get good at, it's okay that we've acknowledged it, but we're going to bring it right back. We're going to bring it right back every single time so that we are fully present with this person because those nonverbal cues are important. Am I seeing signs of them thinking? You know, is it appropriate for me to allow space? And when we're not really paying attention to that, we miss a lot of those cues that could really lead to a far more evocative conversation than just, you know, kind of just being half there. So it takes practice. It does, and we're, you know, still, you know, it takes practice.
It's a constant practice.
It does. So,
and we're designed, our brain is designed in a way that we are making those quick movements. And so you really, I feel like we, as coaches, we have to sort of work against our, I guess, survival.
Yeah.
Our survival design of our brains and to just calm it down.
To just be.
Yes.
Yeah. Who knew just being was so difficult?
Yeah,
right?
Seems like it'd be easy.
Seems like such an easy concept, and it's actually really, really difficult. Yet with practice, and again, practice being kind of our own practice of getting good at just being with ourselves, finding that anchor that's effective for us, and really practicing bringing ourselves back, then it gets much easier when you have that person in front of you, because that's a skill that you've already been crafting on your own.
Yeah.
And again, so I think I actually already talked about all that on the slide, didn't I? So it's really important. So that brings us to nonverbal communication, which is basically our undivided attention. So it all wraps in together, you know. We want to avoid shuffling through the papers, reading emails. I mean, surely we're not going to be reading emails when we have someone in front of us. But again, like we all have these watches on. And they're dinging us every 2 seconds. And so we really want to make sure that if that is something that we can't control, you know, put the phone out of the room, put the watch away. You know, maybe it is, you know, an example in our office is I work out of a co-working space so that I have a space that my dog is not barking whenever the Amazon man comes, and I can really give my people their full attention. And so when I have people in person, we don't always have a front desk person there. So, you know, under great intentions, they said, hey, we have this new camera. So if there's ever anybody that's at the front door needs to come in, or if you're ever by yourself, you know, we're going to put this on your desk. That way you can always see what's going on. Well, y'all, that thing dinged every 30 seconds. Oh my gosh. So, and it flips like the screen. And so it's like, it's not that it was like in our face, and I honestly don't even know if the person over here, but I mean, we were 5 minutes in, I was like, if you do not mind, I am going to remove this from my desk because, you know, it's like front door. And there's one in the front and the back. And it was such a great thought, you know. And again, I'm a 9. So I thought, well, that's so sweet of you to be concerned with my well-being, being here by myself.
No.
So again, it wasn't a failure. We learned that putting the camera on the desk was a terrible idea because it was way too distracting for me to be present with this person. So, you know, it happens. And the person appreciated me stopping and saying, hey, we got to get this.
Right.
This is distracting me. So even just being open and honest with them was another just layer of rapport of like, hey, you know, this was, you know, something they were trying out and it's not going to happen again. So anyway, we want to have eye contact. I mean, this is pretty common sense. Now, again, with eye contact, this is kind of a big one because culturally this looks different. And we'll talk about cultural differences. Yet we do, if we have someone who is from a different ethnicity, a different background, it is really our responsibility to step in and learn a little bit about that, because sometimes eye contact is actually not appreciated. It's, you know, you're looking down on them. There's certain cultures where it's even, they feel like they've done something wrong. I had a hearing aid patient, and you know, as an audiologist, we are constantly because, you know, we see with our lips whether we like it or not. So I'm always leaning forward, eye contact. And, you know, I could see this patient in front of me just shutting down. And so I inquired a little bit, and the translator who was with him said, that is actually, he feels like he's done something wrong. When you speak to him in that manner to them, that is, it really shuts them down. And so great learning experience for me. And so we really do, and it's okay to ask. Like, it's okay to be curious. We don't know every culture. And so he really appreciated me asking and being curious about his culture to learn a little more about what's the best way for me to communicate with you. So eye contact is important, yet side note, we do need to know different cultures, because that can be a big one with different cultures. Paying attention to facial expressions. Again, just like Ray noticing her person kind of shutting down. We want to pay attention to that. It's helpful to mirror some of those facial expressions. So again, if they're excited, we're not really just going to sit there like a lump on the log. Like, we're going to be excited too. And again, it's kind of natural. Like, if someone comes in and they're like, oh my gosh, you know, I made A on my test. We're like, that's, you know, we kind of just, you know, reflect that back. And that comes into posture and kind of the way that we're leaning. You know, how often do you guys see, you know, if you have a teenager in your house, you know, it's like the arms are crossed and the head is back. You know, what we do in our expressions go a long way. And so again, if this person is really vested in our conversation and we're sitting here with our arms crossed, that's probably not going to convey what's actually going on in the conversation. So we want to be really intentional about, you know, when we're kind of in that conversation, we are engaging more as we're leaning forward. And so it can go a long way. Okay, other focused listening. This is basically just listening from their perspective. Now, this is a term that's on their study guide, okay? So that is why we were very intentional about putting this into this slide, because we just want you to be familiar with that terminology. But it's basically just listening as if you're through that other person's lens. Like, we're always self-centered. You know, anytime something happens, we always see it through the lens of ourselves. Like, how many times have we had something happen and we've automatically put like, oh gosh, what did I do? You know, we live in kind of this self-absorbed world, and we don't always mean to be, but it's just the way that, you know, again, it's just the way that our brains survive. Right. Like, we have to care about ourselves.
Right.
And so it's really listening through the other, you know, kind of taking ourselves out of the picture and allowing ourselves to listen through that person that's right in front of us and losing that self-focused mindset. Okay. Now we're going to dig into reflections. Okay, so this is a big part of what we were going to do in our communication. So this is a huge coaching skill. So we're going to go through some of those common reflections.
Probably what you spend most of your time doing.
Yes.
As a coach.
Yes.
Is reflections.
We're going to be reflecting. And, you know, it's this delicate balance between reflecting back statements yet then asking questions as well. But we always want those reflections to be heavier than the questions, because we don't want that person to feel like we're just constantly interrogating them, right? Yet when we reflect back, they feel heard. So reflections have a lot of value in the coaching relationship. So they're going to convey active listening. You know, when we reflect something back, they're like, hey, yeah, that's what I said. She heard me. They're going to provide clarity. You know, a lot of times, particularly when we talk about a complex reflection, you know, we're sometimes making a little guess about their intentions. And so it's going to provide some clarity in the conversation. And if we guess a little wrong, they'll be really quick to be like, well, no, actually what I meant was blah, blah, blah. And then again, that allows them to feel valued, because when we're taking the time to really appreciate and understand what they're saying, then they feel heard. Reflections are going to allow them to hear their own words. And so this can be really big. When you hear you know, how many times have you said, oh, wow, I did say that? You know, and when we hear, we actually hear in a different part of our brain than when we verbalize. So when we can kind of spread all of it out between the brain, it really can be impactful. So it's super helpful for us to hear our own words, and that's exactly what a reflection does. Did you?
Yeah, well, no, that makes me think about that brain sleep research book that I read, where like the more parts of your brain that have been activated with something, then at night when you sleep, it's more likely that it goes into the long-term memory versus just a small portion of your brain being, anyway, sorry. Yeah, made me think of that. And
all areas.
And it made me think of the one client, which you know about this, but this client made this statement. I wish I could remember what it was. I have it written down. But she made this statement in an early session that it blew me away. It was such a profound statement. I'm like, man, that should be like a quote on, you know, on some like forever famous quote. So I wrote it down afterward, and then later we were talking, and it came up at near the end of the session, not the quote, not anything she said, but the actions and stuff. I remembered that quote. So we were virtual. So the next week I started out with, on my screen, I wrote this quote, and it was hers. And I put down and I said, hey, I want to just start out with this quote this week. And I want you to tell me if you know who said this. And she read it, and she was like, wow, that's profound. And I'm like, yeah, it is, isn't it? Do you know who said it? And she was like, wait a minute, did I say that? I'm like, yes, you did. And I hit my little slide button, and up came her name and the date. And I'm like, she later, after we closed our session, our time together, she told me, she said, that was one of the most powerful things you did for me, was just putting my own words back out there. It really motivated me to move forward. So hearing our own words, even if it's 2 or 3 sessions later, can be really impactful.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite Ray stories. Like, Ray, that's good coaching right there.
I got lucky. The blind squirrel gets the nut once in a while.
So, but they can be very, very powerful. And that's why we take advantage of them in literally everything that we do. It's a huge part of our coaching sessions are going to be dedicated to reflections. You know, reflections allow self-discovery and exploration. Again, when we reflect that back, you know, it allows that person to really absorb what they have said. It allows them to feel understood. Again, this goes back to, if we're reflecting what they've said, they know we heard what they said. That's important. They allow us to control the conversation. So again, this goes back to that directing that we were talking about.
I just want to say, I swear I changed that. I corrected the spelling of that word.
Oh, and I know I did too.
I know. Why is it not corrected?
I don't know why I didn't save.
No. We'll try to save next time.
Yeah,
Sorry, y'all.
Sorry, y'all. I'll go in and fix that tonight.
We're not trying to control the conversion.
No. It does allow us to control the conversation.
Right.
again, so this is where that directing comes in, because we choose what to reflect back. If they're in front of us and, I've just had this terrible week. I didn't do anything I said I was going to do. I only walked 2 times and I said I was going to do 5, and I just feel so terrible about myself. And, so we're not going to reflect back, wow, you only walked 2 days out of your 5 days. You feel terrible, which is what they said.
Right.
We're going to reflect back, you were able to walk 2 days out of your week. And then at that point, what an appropriate question, what did that day look like, or wherever that conversation goes. So that's where we direct. That's where we get to control that conversation, is when we are reflecting and asking questions, we have complete control of which direction that conversation is going to go in.
That's right. We get to we're choosing what gets reflected back.
What they hear back. Yeah. Because again, when they hear it, it's registering in the brain in a different place. We really want them to hear those positive things that are coming out. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to always be very intentional about what reflections we're reflecting back.
Right. And for a person who hasn't gone walking in years, walking 2 days this week that's a success.
Yeah, pretty amazing actually.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Reflections are also going to keep the conversation moving. Again, when we reflect back in how we reflect, particularly when we get into a complex reflection, we're opening up just a little bit more of a door by adding a little bit more to that reflection, adding a little bit of meaning, a little bit of a guess as to what they may be feeling. And that's going to allow them to then extend that conversation. So again, there's a lot of method to the madness when it comes to how we reflect, what we reflect. Yeah. And we really do want to keep that ratio of about 2 to 1. You do want to be reflecting more than asking questions, because again, no one wants to just sit and feel like they're just on the other side of somebody just firing questions. And even to some degree, questions can feel almost a little, like almost, we'll get into the whys here in a minute.
I'm trying to think of the word that's
in your
brain, but it's not coming to me.
When you say it as a reflection, like what, I'm trying to think of a good example of what I'm trying to say here. Reflecting it seems much easier to digest, I guess, than there's no judgment. There's no judgment to a reflection, but sometimes if you are forming it as a question, it can almost come across as judgmental.
It's perceived judgment, I'll say, like, on the client's part.
We'll say you're happy today. You're happy today versus you're happy today. Like when you kind of have that upward inflection of a question, sometimes it can just bring a little bit of judgment to it. So again, we really want to kind of keep the reflections heavier than the questions just for ease of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, simple reflection. And again, you guys don't even be afraid to interrupt me. So if you have a question or you feel like we're going too fast,
or if you can think of the word
that is in my brain, by all means,
please say it.
Please say it out loud. It'll be great. So there's different types of reflections. So simple reflection is just that. We are just going to paraphrase pretty much exactly what was said. It's not really going to add any meaning or interpretation to the statement. It's just going to, basically let them know, yes, I heard you. This is really kind of the definition of mirroring. We are just reflecting exactly back what is in front of us. Mm-hmm. So let's just kind of play around with this. I'm frustrated and angry with my current job. So what might a simple reflection be? And we'll practice a couple of these in a minute. So a simple reflection is going to be, you're frustrated and angry. So we didn't really change a whole lot. We're just kind of repeating back what was said.
When you first start coaching, this will be the ones that you go to first. They're the easiest to do, and or at least I say that, maybe not. Some of you have been coaching before, so you're probably advanced. But in your very first coaching experiences, I know I relied heavily on simple ones because they're more natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just another example. I'm overwhelmed with the holiday season coming up. I haven't done a very effective job of staying on my plan to increase my physical activity. So a simple reflection might be, this is an overwhelming time and it's affecting your ability to stick with your exercise plan. So again, it's just a way of restating what they've said.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you do, and it's just simple, even if it's not a big long sentence like this one, but a very short one, clients will say, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like they really get behind the notion of hearing their words back to them, and said back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, complex reflection. This is when we're going to add a little bit of meaning, a little bit of interpretation to what they've said. So it ultimately boils down to us even really just making a guess about an unspoken content or what might come next. And really your guesses are just kind of based off of what you've heard before, what you know about the client, what you've learned about them. It can be helpful to reflect what you think they may be feeling. So again, paying attention to that nonverbal communication of, this must be very hard for you. Maybe they never said this is hard, yet we really kind of see them, change that in stature. Yeah.
Big heavy sigh or something.
And you may be wrong. And
You
that's
may be
okay.
wrong.
They're going to tell you really, no, actually,
Yeah.
this is,
Or they'll say, well,
But-
that isn't exactly what I meant.
right.
Yeah, and they'll clarify for you.
They will clarify.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's usually a very low risk. If you guess wrong in a complex reflection, it is very rarely ever going to interfere with rapport, interfere with their progress, the coaching. So it's okay. It's okay to throw a complex reflection out there, and it's generally going to be a very low risk occurrence if something, there's not going to be much harm in the conversation at all. And it really is a way of continuing that conversation because, again, when you kind of take a guess, then it just gives them a little bit more of a direction in how, where this is going. So reflections essentially close the gap between what you believe a person has said and what they're actually experiencing. So it is really our way of just kind of clarifying, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Is this what you're actually experiencing? And sometimes that has to take a little bit more of a leap than a simple reflection to kind of get to that point. Okay, so let's just do a couple of examples. I don't know what to do. Complex reflection might be, you feel lost and confused. So again, we're kind of making a guess,
And if they don't feel lost,
right. And,
they might say,
they might,
well,
well,
no, I don't feel lost. I feel ...
feel overwhelmed. I feel, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that if I fail at this, I'm afraid that I'll fail at this like I have in the past. It's scary to take on such a big challenge, and you're hoping this time will be different. So again, we don't necessarily know that they're hoping it'll be different. We don't necessarily know they feel like it's all that big of a challenge, yet we're really just kind of stepping a little further out from what they've said.
Right.
Okay, double-sided reflection. So this is when you've got that person who is really kind of on both sides of the fence. This is that person that's really kind of in that ambivalent stage. That's when a double-sided reflection can be really impactful. So you've got this person and there's two sides of the issue and they've got some discrepancy there of like, hey, which way do I want to go here? So a double-sided reflection allows that client to really explore both sides of the issue. It allows them to hear both sides of the issue. It can be helpful to end that reflection with the positive side of the issue. Like this isn't a must, or make or break with a double-sided reflection, but it can be really helpful because again, the last thing we hear is gonna stick. So if they're if they are ready to quit smoking and it's like, oh, I love the way smoking makes me feel, yet it's very isolating to go outside and be with my to have to leave my family. If we were to reflect that back, smoking is enjoyable to you, yet it's very important for you to be with your family. We kind of want that positive side to be the one on the end. So again, another example, I want to lose weight and feel better, but eating is my way to de-stress. You know, so you've got that both sides of the story here going on. So let's just read a couple of examples. So here's the same sentence. So another way to say it, eating to distress is comforting to you. On the other hand, losing weight will make you feel better. So again, we're kind of ending on that positive note, but we're still allowing equal emphasis on both, because it's not our job to pick one or the other, because they're truly in this ambivalence. So as far as we're concerned, there's no good or bad here. We're giving it equal opportunity, yet we're just, again, guiding the discussion to kind of fall with that positive piece on the inside of it.
Right. And your client may end up deciding to not go down the route of trying to eat less or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they may end up working on sleep or something different. So you're just helping them to look at both sides of it and really start coming to make some decisions about this on their own.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the stages of change when we talk about ambivalence and all of that. But again, when they hear themselves, you know, ambivalence they are making progress. You know, if they're ambivalent about something, the awareness of both sides of the story is there. So again, us just reflecting that back to them can really allow them to hear, yeah, there are pros and cons here. Whereas before we even get to pros and cons, we don't even know that, right? Like it's not even on the radar that there's anything to be ambivalent about. So they can be really helpful in just reminding them of, yeah, you've got some, okay, you know, we're starting to weigh some things and maybe there's a direction we want to move.
Yeah. And I've called ambivalence out to clients. Like just said, you know, I hear ambivalence in this area, and ambivalence is a stage of change. Like you are already in the process of change if you are feeling ambivalence.
Yeah. Because a lot of times
I just want to say one thing. Ambivalence kind of, to me, just kind of feels like the client's values may not be aligning with what they're wanting to get out of.
Yes.
Whatever the goal is.
Yes. What a great statement, which in that first session, you're going to go a lot through their vision and their values. And so you bring up such a good point, because what a perfect opportunity to start bringing the values into the conversation. Because you're right, when we live in conflict with our values, we really do feel that ambivalence. And it can be super helpful as we're talking about the pros and cons to bring in those values. So great comment there. Okay, so let's do another one. The doctor tells me that I have to exercise to get my heart disease under control, but I can't afford to take time away from my family and from my work to do it. Having time for family and work is important, and your doctor is telling you that exercise is a necessary component for improving your heart disease. So again, it's just a simple reflection back of both sides. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about and versus but. Have you ever noticed when we give a sentence and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm so proud of you for cleaning your room, but whatever, right?
You forgot to do the dishes.
Right, exactly. So whatever comes after that but basically means whatever we just said doesn't even count, right? I mean, that's pretty much how it's interpreted. Of like, oh, you know, nice teamwork, coworkers, but we got to go faster next time. Well, basically we've said, kibosh, we got to go faster, right? However, a really, really simple way to keep both of them equally important is to just switch that but for something else. So we're going to switch it to an and. On the other hand is a really good one. You know, there's a lot of different phrases you can kind of add in. However, just taking out that but can go a long way in what they've said. So let's just read this one at the bottom. Having time for family and work is important, but your doctor is telling you exercise is a necessary component to improving your heart disease. So if we were to say it again, having time for family and work is important to you, and your doctor is telling you exercise is a necessary component. So again, it just keeps it equal when you do that. Didn't know if I had another slide on that. And you'll notice, and it's funny because now, you know, like I'll hear my husband say all these buts all the time to my kids, and I'm like, you know, wow, gosh, we could have said that so much better, honey. You know, so.
You can still judge your husband, okay?
Yes, you
just
can.
for clarification.
Always.
Or wife, or what significant other.
But, you know, a simple and goes a long way. It really, really does.
Yeah, makes a difference. I have consciously tried to change my buts to ands. It's hard.
It is
when
hard.
it's so ingrained, and the butt is just, that word is so ingrained in my language. But
yeah, it is hard. It's tricky. Okay, amplified reflection. You're going to use an amplified reflection really to almost evoke a little disagreement with what they've said. I don't find that I use amplified reflections very often. I mean, there's certainly a place for them, yet you don't want that to backfire either.
right. Yeah, they're tricky. I have used them before. And they've turned out okay, but I'm always just a little bit nervous if I think, oh, I'm going to.
Yeah, is this going to backfire?
Yeah.
And you can clean it up real quick.
Well,
if
you
it does.
can. You can't.
Again, it's kind of a risky, it's like a complex, you know, you're putting a guess out there as to whether to use it. But, you know, it would be like if someone came and said, you know, I love my wine at night, and I'm going to have as many glasses as I want because alcohol is healthy. And so, you know, an amplified reflection might be, you know, oh, alcohol causes no harm whatsoever, or, you know, like you're just kind of putting it all out there.
Right. You're going to drink all you want, whatever you want.
Yeah, just you can alcohol comes with no consequences.
Yeah.
And then they may say, well, actually, there are some consequences. You know, my husband gets a little irritated when I'm groggy in the morning and I don't move as quickly, or, you know, whatever comes out of that. But it's really just kind of taking what they've said and just putting it all the way at the other end, kind of over the top, so that they're actually like, well, no, not, you know, we're not that far. And it just kind of causes them to question it.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes if this is like a master coach's technique, and I just hadn't mastered it yet because I'm not good at them.
Yeah, I agree. These are hard for me.
Yeah.
These are really hard for me. Okay, so alcohol doesn't affect me. It's not a problem. You're able to drink as much as you want, as often as you like, with no consequences. So again, that would kind of be that amplified reflection. Now, I had an amplified reflection on my exam.
Oh yeah, I did too.
However, it was very noticeable. I mean, you clearly could pick out the amplified reflection from some of the other ones. So they're going to stand out on your own, but it will be, all of their questions come in the form of scenarios. And I feel like almost everyone I've talked to had amplified reflection as part of their exam. So just kind of keep that one, tuck that one away, because it'll be on there. Okay, shifted focus reflection. Basically, this is just going to redirect attention away from maybe a topic creating resistance. Maybe you do have a little bit of a negative Nelly.
Yeah.
And we're kind of moving away from some of that negativity, and we're just kind of shifting that conversation over to a different area. So my doctor says I need to change my habits if I want to be around for my grandchildren. Oh, I'm not going to quit smoking. Okay. You're not interested in quitting smoking. What changes are you interested in making? Sorry if that's in your way. So again, we're reflecting back. We're keeping with the conversation. However, we're just gently shifting into another direction, which again, when we talk about directiveness or guiding, depending on where you are in the literature, this is what we're talking about.
Right.
This is how we are directing that conversation one way versus another so that we're keeping that client on task with, hey, we're here to talk about behavior change. What's the best way for us to kind of keep that topic going?
Yeah. And you said before, this is like you deal with this a lot in terms of your clients. A lot of them end up in your office because of smoking. Yeah. As a part of the insurance smoking cessation program.
Yeah,
or something?
that's one of their biometrics. One of them is smoking. So if they are a smoker, that's one area that they're not going to pass, which is how they end up back with me.
Yeah.
Again, appreciating that autonomy and not driving the ship. If we were to look at a wellness assessment and you see smoking, whatever, clearly smoking is the low-hanging fruit of what's going to kill you first, right? I mean, like if we're talking about health, everyone knows if we quit smoking, we are going to improve our well-being tremendously. Yet that's not my decision to make. And when I respect their autonomy, I'm telling you the whole mood shifts because they come to me thinking she's going to tell me I got to quit smoking. And when we have that discussion of, hey, what would you like to work on? It's amazing. And then by the end, a lot of times they're doing all the other things and it just, it may make sense for me to quit smoking now. And so when you allow that autonomy and let them go in the direction that they want to go, the not smoking comes in a way that makes sense. And then when they're the ones that say, I'm ready to quit smoking, they have the buy-in and they're going to do it. And so it makes such a difference when you put the ball in their court. It's unbelievable, actually.
This is a good one to help. This is a good reflection to help move the ball into their court. I think of it that way.
Yeah. Okay, naming. So basically, this is just a reflection of what's happening in the moment. It can be anything. It can be behaviors. Maybe you're noticing themes. Maybe you're noticing that every time you guys meet, X, Y, and Z happens. And it's okay to name that and bring that out. Maybe you're noticing behaviors. Just like with Ray had her example of every time I use this word, I noticed that this person,
it was just a Robin slang phrase that I can't remember now which one it was, but it was something I gave no thought to the phrase. It just rolled out of my mouth because I was raised with it. But there was a word in that phrase that really made them uncomfortable. And it took me a while I noticed it, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was until it happened a few times. And then I'm like, I think it's that phrase. Every time I say it, there's something about that phrase that bothers her. So when I called it out and just said, hey, every time I say this, I notice a shift in your energy. And it gave her a chance then to say, yeah, I really hate that phrase. It makes me, and she went on to tell me how it made her feel and why. And I'm like, I'm going to lose that phrase.
Yeah.
Thank you for being honest with me, because I don't want to make you feel like that. And I've never really even I hadn't even thought about that phrase. My mama gave me that phrase, or my dad,
Which we're all different.
Yeah.
And we all have different triggers.
Yeah.
Particularly if you have people who have PTSD or certain, there are going to be some things that in our brain seem perfectly fine, but for them, something very innocent can be very triggering. And so to name it, they feel valued. And it's out there, and now they can move on. Whereas if Ray had not named it,
I felt like she was leaving me. I really did. I was like, we're not a good fit for some reason. And after that, we were. So naming can be very impactful. And a lot of times they don't see it. So, you'll be having a conversation with someone and you're like, I noticed that you sit up in your chair a little taller every time you talk about going to the gym. And they're like, oh, I do. And so a lot of times we don't see what we're actually doing. And so when we as the coach take time to name it, it really validates how they are feeling. Like, you know what? I'm actually really excited about that. So naming can be pretty powerful. It really can be. So an example, I notice when you talk about getting more rest at night, your eyes light up and I can see energy in your face.
So again, we're just kind of calling out what they're seeing. When you speak about being a good role model for your kids, you get very teary-eyed. This must be important to you. Okay, metaphors and analogies.
This is best specialty.
Basically, we're just, painting a picture that can bring greater awareness. We all use analogies in life. Everybody can relate to analogies for the most part. So a lot of times it can be an easy way to kind of bring about what they're talking about, to kind of tag an analogy onto it. Like, yeah.
I love them.
That's what's going on.
When someone else, like when you use them, I love them. I can relate to them. It gives me a picture, to relate to, but I'm not good at coming up with them, but I really do like them when you give me one. Yeah. Beth coached me live in front of a class a few years ago.
It's been a while because we didn't know each other. We just started teaching
together. Yeah. So we used we demonstrated. And
we did.
That was one of the things I was like, wow, she's got the best metaphors and analogies. Yeah.
Yeah. So we do not coach each other anymore.
No, and we know each other too well.
We know each other way too well for that to be effective.
But I'm still strength training.
But she's still going.
I'm still doing the thing you helped me to.
It's probably because she sees me every day, y'all. Okay, metaphors and analogies. So you're going to use a lot of phases of it's as if. I feel so worn out all the time. It's like you're dragging around a heavy weight.
That's exactly how it is.
Yeah. Analogies, everyone can relate. So those are an easy one to kind of bring into play. Okay, summarizing. So summarizing is basically us just taking several sentences of what someone has said and kind of putting them all together in one giant reflection. So it's just, a little Cliff Notes, basically, of what's happened. However, a summary really does convey I'm listening, and it allows them to hear their voice again, their own statements again. So by the time you get to the summary, they've heard themselves say it. They've heard you most likely reflect part of that back and some of your general reflections, and then they're hearing it again in your summarizing. And so it's a nice way for them to, again, really kind of sit with their own statements, which can go far with what they're, when they're kind of working toward some of those action steps. It can be helpful for them to summarize. I do that a lot. Like, okay.
Yeah.
What's next? And then they'll just summarize what we just kind of talked about. So it can be effective both ways.
Yeah.
In summarizing.
There's certain sessions that I tend to use summary and ask
More
them
often?
to Yeah. They just sort of lends to it. And as we get to the process of coaching and all the different stages that we looked at before and the details of those, it just fits in certain places, I think, naturally, summarizing or asking them to summarize.
Yeah. Sometimes with accountability, when they summarize it,
especially like the details of the steps they've laid out, and they summarize it right before we end, it helps them to go remember and maybe even jot down. Sometimes they will, like, oh yeah, and I need to do that right now.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to get into questions. So I'm going to look at the clock. So we have an hour. Okay, is everybody okay? Are you guys surviving out there in the world of all of our slides? If not, let us know. If we need for someone to lead us in some quick chair yoga, don't be afraid.
Some what?
Some chair yoga.
No. Chair yoga. Oh, I thought you said Cheerio. And I'm like, what's a Cheerio?
What's a It's a greeting. Cheerio.
It's a new thing. I don't. Cheerio. Thought it might be like, Tay in the wind. Oh, sorry. Old Jodie Foster reference. You're not old enough to know that movie, do you? Oh, Nail. You got to watch it.
Nail?
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Great movie.
I have heard of it, but I don't think I've seen it. Okay. Whew. So let's get into questioning. Okay. our questions are going to extend the conversation, okay? It is going to integrate active listening and other focused listening. So again, the questions that we ask are going to be really impactful on where the coaching session's going and kind of what we want that client to dig a little deeper into. So again, this is going to maintain the direction that we want it to go in. And in general, there's two types of questioning we're going to use. We've got closed-ended questions, and then we've got open-ended questions. So we're just going to talk about closed-ended questions just real quick. Basically, there's not a whole lot of room in coaching for a closed-ended question. It's generally just going to lead to a stop in the conversation. You know, like how many of us, how was your day? Good. You know.
Did you have a good day?
Did you have? Yeah, I just asked it in the.
Yeah, no,
I'm
you're
so
used to open-ended.
Not doing
A real closed one.
A real closed is, did you have a good day? And they're like, no.
Yes.
Yeah. Versus, how was your day?
You said no. I said yeah. It's my bedtime.
This is our bedtime. I am not lying, guys. Like, we are early birds. We get very early. And so, we start shutting down about 7:30. So closed-ended questions we really do want to use sparingly because it doesn't really allow a lot of room for elaboration, even in our own brains. It doesn't encourage further thinking. No. However, there's a place for them. So it's not that we're never going to use them. It's just we're going to, do you need anything else from me? Mm-hmm. So there are times in the coaching session where it can be really beneficial. Are you ready to start? Is there anything else you would like to discuss? However, when we are really kind of in that engaging part of our session, a closed-ended question is not going to get us very far. Right. So we really want to stick to the open-ended questions. With open-ended questions, we want to really kind of keep them to what and how's. That's going to be the bulk of our questions. What and how's, what would you like to do? How was your day?
There you go.
We're always going to kind of rephrase into that what and how. And this is going to lead to deeper insight. And it really should be the majority of our questions. And it allows our client to think a little bit before responding. And again, that's where we want to maybe sometimes even allow a little bit of space for that silence to really let them kind of think through how they want to answer that question. And what and how really expands the conversation. Now there's a whole possibility of answers, and we don't know where they're going to go with these answers.
No, we don't.
And that's the fun part.
That's the fun part.
That's where we just put on our beginner's mind lens and we just wait for what's going to come out.
Yeah. It's fun.
Because, again, those closed-ended questions are a little too guiding almost too. Like we really want that person to be able to kind of dig deep and there isn't a right or wrong answer and what is that going to look like? We really want to avoid why questions because this really can bring about judgment. And when we have judgment, we're probably going to start to see them become a little bit defensive rather than want to kind of dig deep and gain some insight. And so, if you think about a question, and gosh, as a lot of times with parents or with family, why would you do that? It's like, oh, it doesn't sound good on the other end of that why.
I instantly felt defensive.
Yes, yes. So when you just make a simple shift though and get the why out, why do you choose to eat at a fast food restaurant? Well, that comes with like a lot of judgment tone, right? Like, why are you eating there? Versus, what's important to you about eating at a fast food restaurant? Well, it's the same question, yet it feels very, very different when we ask it that way.
Yeah, because what's important about fast food restaurants for me is the convenience of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of time in my busy schedule.
So there's always going to be, and they feel safe. If they feel like, again, we're just judging them over and over again, the next time we ask them a question, they're not going to feel like they're going to answer the way they think we want them to hear it.
Yeah.
Versus when we just lose that judgment, it makes all the difference in the world. So these are just some examples of open-ended questions. I mean, this is literally like there could be a trillion that land on this slide, but what have you learned from this experience? What's at stake if you don't make this change? Versus like, why haven't you changed by now? So again, just there's a lot of difference in the way it comes across when we keep it to kind of those what and hows. How would your life be different? What does this change mean to you? What challenges might you face? What are you most proud of? Again, keeping it to that what or how really expands that opportunity for that client to go all sorts of different places with those answers. Okay, so essentially, we really just want to be asking evocative questions. I mean, that's the goal, is allowing that client to dig deeper because they're going to discover things that they never knew they had. And our number one mindset is when you walk in our door, you already have everything you need to succeed already within you. All we are doing as a coach is evoking that out. That's our job.
Pulling it out of them.
And we know that. We know that every single human on this earth has everything they need to be successful in that. And when they feel that, that's when they really can bloom and grow. And so, evoke, the definition is calling forth what's already present. I mean, that's really that's all we're doing as coaches, is we're just allowing them to see it. So when we ask those questions, we're really kind of getting to the root of all of that with that client. It's the foundation. It's the core of good coaching, is allowing for that client to discover all of those amazing things about themselves. And once they do that, they can take it and move on forever. That's the beauty of it. It's like once you learn the skill of coaching, they don't need us anymore. Our end goal is for them to just move on, and whatever comes their way, oh, okay, this is the process that I use. This is what I know about myself. Now I'm going to take this and do this in this next thing that I want to do.
Yep.
So it's going to bring about curiosity. Again, when we ask those questions, it allows them to be curious about themselves. A lot of times we don't even know the things that, come out when we have certain questions asked. It's going to foster creativity. They're thought-provoking. They lead to insight. They don't really direct the conversation. In what we ask, it does. However, their answer could be anything. And that's the beauty of it. And then based on that answer, we're going to learn so much about them. And we're going to know where we need to go with that next question. They allow space. They evoke and elicit versus guide and direct, right? So we really want to evoke. And again, that evoke and elicit, these are kind of motivational interviewing terms of we want them to kind of dig deep versus us telling them. If we ask appropriate questions, they're going to figure out, oh, okay, I don't necessarily think working out at 4:30 a.m. is going to be the best idea for me. I know I'm a night person versus why don't we try working out in the morning and let's see how that works out. So we're really allowing them to kind of explore that within. And within our questions, just like we talked about before with the vision and values, we're going to kind of constantly bring that back, bring in that vision. What is it that's important to them to make this change? What are your values? And when we continuously connect to those values, we know that that's going to drive that intrinsic motivation far more than any outside source.
Right. And help them with the ambivalence issue.
Yes. Yes. Affirmations. So basically, affirmations is just noticing, recognizing, and acknowledging the positive. Now, when we do this, though, it needs to be genuine. We do need to truly believe this. So we don't want to just be firing all these positive statements at them where it's not really coming from anywhere. Yet, when you know this person and you have that rapport, it becomes really easy to affirm.
Yeah.
It does. And when we're affirming, you will see a decrease in defensiveness. And it does allow for a more openness because they feel good and they feel safe. And a lot of times you're pointing out things that, again, they don't even really notice are there. Affirmations are different from praise. Again, praise kind of implies that imbalance. And so affirming is a very neutral way of pulling out the positive versus, oh, I'm so proud of you, versus you must be very proud. You know, those come across very different. You know, again, when you put that I in there, I'm proud of you, then that's like, oh, you've met my standards. I'm so glad that you've been here. You've come up, you've been able, versus, wow, you must be really proud. We're all equal.
Yeah.
With that statement.
Right.
As we are affirming, it allows them to then pick the practice up and it carries over. So then they're able to start affirming themselves, which is, you know, awesome. End goal,
One of the
right?
end
When we can
goals.
see our own positives,
Well,
then
thank
we
you.
really can become more intrinsically motivated.
Yes.
Certain professions, again, this is where it can be hard kind of based on where you're coming from, because there are professions out there where we are looking for the problems. We are looking for the thing to fix. That's why they're coming to us. You know, when I see someone who has, you know, congenital hearing loss, I'm looking for all the things like, wow, what went wrong during the pregnancy? What is this? What did the mother do? And we really kind of have to shift that mindset to, no, there's nothing wrong. There's no problem to be fixed. There's no deficit here whatsoever. What are the positive strengths that you have? What's admirable about you? Those are the things we're going to focus on. Those are the things that we're going to pull out. Reframing. This is probably something you're going to use all the time.
Yeah.
And
a lot with
all
some
the
clients.
time. Yes.
Yeah. Some clients not
Yes.
as much, but other clients a lot.
You do a lot of reframing.
Yeah.
This is kind of for those negative Nellies that just, it's so easy for them to see all the things that they did not do.
Right.
And, you know, when we reframe, it makes a big difference. And it's just another way of seeing things. You know, just like we've said before, there's no failures. You know, when we reframe that, of like, no, this was an amazing learning opportunity. If we didn't do this, we would never know X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And most of the time, the client's like, oh, yeah, you're right.
Now we know.
Now we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When we reframe, a lot of times, this is a view that they've never even been aware of. And to us, it's so easy to point it out because we're kind of watching it play out. But for them, it's like, oh my gosh, I've never really thought of it that way. And again, this is where failure really is viewed as a learning opportunity. So we're just taking what's going on and we're just shining a new light on it.
Yeah.
Because there's always different ways to see the same thing. There's always a different way of seeing something.
Yeah.
And that's where we can be really, really impactful in allowing them to see all sides of the story as opposed to just honing in on that one idea that they think did or didn't happen.
Right. I mean, if you have a client who did it for one day, but they had planned to do it for 5, but then you focus in on the one day they did do it and what went right about that and
Yeah.
what was different about that day that made it successful that day, and start digging into the details of things that, and they start getting the aha moments of, well, that day I didn't do it at 5.
Yeah.
I was going up, but I ended up doing it in the evening, and that was what. So, reframing to the positive, even if the positive is small in the scheme of what they had planned, still helps them learn the details of what works for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even what does the step look like?
Right.
I mean, we see that a lot.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yes.
Okay. This is a realistic step for me,
Right.
based on what I've learned.
Right. I thought this was my step, but this needs to be my step,
Yeah.
and that is okay.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Acknowledgement. Basically, this is just bringing attention to what's been accomplished and even maybe some challenges that they've been able to conquer. This can be really useful when you're talking about motivation. And again, acknowledgement is just basically, saying what was there,
Yeah.
what happened, what did they do? We're just acknowledging it. And again, we really want to keep that acknowledgement to the positive to really allow them to see you were able to exercise one day this week. That you must feel really good about that day. So an example, you're feeling frustrated, you were unable to completely fully complete your goal of 3 days of exercise this week, let's take a moment and celebrate the 2 days you were able to exercise. So again, even though we're still not just wiping away what they've done, but hey, look at this.
Yeah.
You did 2 days. That's great.
And I do think that, at least in my coaching experience, I've found that people will accomplish a whole lot. Like, there's a lot of steps involved in starting something new. They think of it as, I'm going to exercise, but they had to buy a new pair of shoes and order them and pay for them and then get them on and the right socks to go with them. And like, there's a bazillion steps in there. But I think a lot of times clients will just see this one end thing and not ever acknowledge all the pieces and parts they put together to even get to day one. And so I think a part of acknowledgement is helping them to see things in smaller increments and recognize that these habit changes happen in small itty bitty steps, small itty bitty successful steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Have you guys ever read or listened to James Clear, Atomic Habits?
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
what just popped in my mind.
Yes.
Little successes and like how really your end goal should be the focus, but the system you put in place to therefore reach that is what's going to make you more successful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
exactly.
love how he breaks it down too into like the first step should be almost unnoticeable. Like, it doesn't create any resistance in you. It's kind of so small. And you're just doing it at ease, and then you just sort of build on that and stack them. Habits stack them. And so, yeah, I love that book.
It's a great book, guys. If you have not read it, it is a great book. It is.
Yeah. I use some of those techniques in my
Yeah.
getting myself. I paid for like a gym membership 3 or 4 different times in my life and went for like a month and then quit. And this last time around, a few years ago now, I finally did. But you know what, and I was reading Atomic Habits at the time, and my very first step was to just order myself a water bottle that I loved to take with me to the gym. And I cannot tell you how happy that water bottle made me, because it was beautiful. It was bluish purple, which is like my favorite color. It's like a purple, but with more in the blue than the red. And yeah, so I'm like, man, this really works. You just do one little bitty thing.
Mm-hmm.
I drug that thing around with me like a security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so true. Mine was always to buy a new pair of running shoes in the summer.
Yes.
But whenever in the season, if I buy a new pair of running shoes and I look at my feet while I'm running,
Yes.
I'm more likely to do it.
It's like a little.
Last year I didn't, and I felt it. I was very unmotivated.
I'm glad you said that. I need to buy myself a new pair because I've been kind of slacking on my running lately. And I keep thinking I really need a new pair. And there's a beautiful pair out right now, and I need to get them. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah. It's so true, though. And we all have our little thing, right? That seems so silly, yet it's so significant. And when we allow that person to discover it, look at what happens.
Mm-hmm. That little thing that just makes them super happy.
Yeah.
That most people wouldn't even think of as a step in the direction of being
Right.
successful in the thing they want to be successful in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When in reality, it's a big step.
It's a big step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a big step. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Growth mindset. So again, these are terms that you're going to see on the study guide. So we just wanted to be intentional about at least getting them in front of you so that you just have some familiarity with it. Most of us know about growth mindset, fixed mindset. We want to keep ourselves in that growth mindset. We really do, particularly as the coach. I mean, we believe that they can conquer the world. They can, and we know this, and that there really isn't a fixed, finite, you've never been a runner, you're never going to be able to run. If you haven't started running by now, it's just not going to be a thing. We really want to stay in that growth mindset of, okay, well, let's experiment. Let's try. What do you know about yourself? What are your strengths? Let's take those and apply those to that thing that we maybe feel like is a little fixed in our life. And, you know, we know nothing is fixed. So we want to kind of stay in that growth mindset. This is really, again, where we kind of get in that trial and correction versus trial and error. There's no real wrong way to do anything. All it is just learning. We're just learning no matter what we do. I even think, didn't you buy one water bottle and you didn't like it?
I did, and I didn't like it. Didn't motivate me at all.
Yeah.
I wasn't happy when I looked at it. I'm like, I don't even want to take it.
And
So,
then
I gave it
ordered
away.
the other one. And then she came into our coaching session and was like, I've got it. I've
Yes.
got the water bottle that is making me feel warm and fuzzy inside. And I went to the gym. So
Yeah, that's
again,
right.
you know, we don't know until we try. We don't know we don't like the water bottle that doesn't have the handle on it until we try, you
Right.
know. So, and again, it looks different on everybody. It's, you know, stuff.
But we
So excuse all my facial expressions with these.
She's usually much more pleasant than she looks.
Exactly. Exactly. We're usually like up, moving around.
Yeah, we're normally
see
standing
everybody.
up. Yeah.
Okay, interrupt and redirect. So again, this is where we are going to, we can sometimes fall in that totally non-directive mode. If we're just constantly following that client wherever they're going, we could be back at Aunt Sally in the grocery store, like really quick.
I could be hearing
So-
lots about Aunt Sally.
Yes, exactly. So interrupt and redirect is really kind of this tool in your back pocket for those times and or / those people who tend to like to veer off a little bit as we're going. And so this can be really helpful to have in your back pocket. When you are using interrupt and redirect, because again, we don't want to interrupt. That's really going to break that repair. That's going to be, you know, not necessarily considered active listening, but there are times where it may be warranted. And so when you do this in an appropriate way, kind of the way that it's set up to where it continues that flow, it can be okay and it can be not quite so, you know, detrimental on the conversation. And so the best way to do this is in that first coaching session, just kind of put it out there of like, hey, you know, if we're in conversation and we start to maybe get off track a little bit, what might be a good way, a good word, a good cue, or a good approach for me to get us back on track? You know, and sometimes that is just a word, you know, oh gosh, I'm a rambler, I'm a talker. You know, we had a student before and she knew it from day one. I mean, she just loved to talk and she'd catch her own self, you know, start redirecting her own self as the client because she kind of knew on the other side what was getting ready to come. But we all have those personalities. And so when you put it out there in that first coaching session to just say, hey, what might be a good way for us to approach this if it happens? That way, when you do get there, it isn't a surprise to them. It really isn't that disruptive. You've already kind of put it out there of like, hey, this might be something that might help us, you know, because your time is valuable and we want to make sure that we are addressing what you came here to do. And by doing that, allowing us to really stay on topic is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
You know,
I definitely put this in my first session. And then when it does come up, and sometimes it doesn't, some clients don't get off on tangents much and some get off on a lot. But when it does come up, it was their decision as to how that was going to happen. And so they're not offended by it
yeah.
because they made the decision. I had one client say, just raise your hand, like, oh, let me get into the, just raise your hand and say, hey, I think we're getting off topic here, kind of thing. And I was like, okay. I felt a little intrusive to me to do that, but it happened and I did it, and she just grinned and said, yeah, you're right. I didn't even have to say what I was supposed to say with it. She's like, yeah, you're right. Okay, back to the coaching conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it's their idea, they accept it very easily.
Yeah.
So I would recommend go ahead and put it in your housekeeping part.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It can be helpful.
Yeah.
So basically what we're going to do, how we're going to do it is we're going to interrupt with whatever that agreed kind of thing is, and then pause for just a second. And that's going to allow the coach time to offer a reflection or a statement to really kind of acknowledge, you know, hey, we're getting ready to redirect here. And then we'll redirect the conversation back to where we're going. And I think I have an example here. Yeah. Joan, let's pause for a moment. I'm noticing that our conversation is discussing work. As we consider your goal of better nutrition, what connections between work and nutrition do we need to keep in mind?
You see how smooth that was?
Yeah, this is just kind of and this really, there wasn't even that kind of premeditated, hey, this is how it's going to happen. So there are ways to do it because there, maybe we haven't set the rule. You don't have to, it can just be helpful to kind of have it out there. And again, when you meet with them and you learn that person, you're going to learn a lot about them in that first session. So sometimes we might better discuss the interrupt and redirect here.
Right.
And sometimes it may not even be a thing. You may not even feel like, it's necessary. But to go ahead and get it out there, it can be helpful. But there are ways to do it, where it's just this gentle, like, hey, let's pause for a moment. That's the interrupt.
Yeah.
And then the redirecting is, I'm kind of noticing this. What connections can we make between our discussion now and your goals? Whatever that looks like. Okay, bottom lining. Again, this is just a word that's on your study guide, so we just want you to be familiar with it. Basically, it just means getting to the essence of the conversation. Keeping the client on task. Again, paying attention to that directiveness, how much are we guiding them? We're not just letting them take us all over everywhere, but that there is actually a goal in place for what we want to accomplish during that coaching session. And it can be helpful for the coach too. We need to be getting to the point. We don't want to be all out here, wait, why am I talking? We really want to kind of keep that bottom lining in check. Okay, scaling and rulers. We're going to use this a lot, and we will dig much deeper into scaling and rulers when we start going through the coaching
Process.
Structure.
I call it process.
It's the process.
I know,
We
the
call
National
it the
Board calls
process.
it structure.
They call it the structure. So you're always going to see us pause in, because in my mind, it's the process.
Yeah. But the National Board
Step
calls it
one,
the coaching structure.
Yes. So when we get into the actual structure of a coaching session and what that looks like, we will dig a lot deeper into scaling and rulers.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. But basically, it's just a nice way to allow that client to kind of put a number on more of a qualitative topic, right? And so generally, we'll use that scale of 1 to 10, but it can be really valuable in allowing you to kind of get a gauge of where they stand. And allowing them to kind of put a number on it of like, okay, yeah, this is how I'm feeling. And so the scaling comes in when we're talking about the readiness to change, like how ready are you to change in this? How important is this right now? And again, we'll talk a lot about this as we move on into the structure. How confident are you that you're ready to make a change? When you have someone, oh, well, I'm probably a 2 or a 3. Okay, well, if we're a 2 or 3 in confidence, we know that this is something we're going to dig a little deeper into. And again, we'll get into that of like, what does that look like? How do you handle
it when someone says I'm a 2? It's important. It's a 10. It's why I'm here, and I'm confident at a level of 2.
Right.
Yeah. We'll deal with how to address that.
Yeah. So scaling and rulers can be really helpful. Decisional balance. So this is a tool that you can use if you've got that person that is just super ambivalent in front of you. And basically what it is it's just a way of evaluating the pros and cons of change and the pros and cons of no change. And again, when we are tackling through a decisional balance, we are doing this in a 100% neutral manner. So in our lens, there are no pros or cons to either. It's not, we're not trying to weigh them. We're really giving equal opportunity to every single thing that they're going to put out there. And so as you do this, you're going to talk through the pros and cons. And so, there is an order that can be more impactful when you tackle it this way. That if you start with, okay, well, what are the advantages of staying the same?
And that throws them.
Yes.
It throws them for a loop. They're not used to
does.
people asking them what, like, what's the advantage of just keeping it like it is?
Yeah, just staying. Because, you know, everyone's telling them all the 1,000 reasons why they should quit smoking, right? So no one's literally ever taken the time to be like, well, what are the pros of staying the same? And so then, okay, what are the cons of staying the same? And then you're going to kind of flip the switch to change, which is just another way of looking at it. Okay, well, what are the disadvantages of change? And then what are the advantages of change? And again, when you bookmark those advantages, you're kind of piecing it on the outside. Mm-hmm. So the where ultimately they most likely feel they need to be is kind of bookend on the front end. And this little guy this is just a guy kind of going through a whole decisional balance thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so Ray uploaded this into Teachable, so y'all can go in and watch it. He just kind of goes through it. It's not any super exciting bears crawling down in caves giving hugs video, but it's, you know, he just kind of goes through a full decisional balance. Some clients may really find this like to really go through and write it out. And we may, if we have time, we actually have a decisional balance worksheet that we can upload and we can do one day in class of like have everybody go through the pros and cons. A lot of times this is just a very simple discussion that I have with my clients. And we just go through and just allow them to say it out loud. Some people are very visual. Sometimes it can be really, if you've got that truly ambivalent person yet you feel like they just are on the verge of being ready to change. Yeah. And it just may be helpful to actually see it in front of them. Then this may be really helpful to actually have them go through.
Yeah, and if you have clients that are kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, quantitative in nature, just seeing the number of items that they put within each area sometimes I think can be impactful. Like I got 10 here, and only 2 here. Right. I mean, it's obvious I need to head in this direction. Yeah. Yeah, kind of thing. I mean, but it's, you know, it's up for them to decide that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. We always approach this from a very, very neutral, because at this point they are neutral. So if you're bringing in a decisional balance, we are truly in ambivalence, and it is not our job to try to tip the scale one way or another. We truly are just being that neutral party sounding board of like, hey, let's just talk through it.
Yep.
You know, let's go through the pros and cons.
All the angles, yes. And for those of you who are super conscientious, because I noticed some of you have already worked your way through several weeks worth of stuff in Teachable, I put this in week 3. So you know where the YouTube video is I put it in week 3. And week 1 through 5 are open to you. And you can work through them at your own pace. And as soon as you finish the quiz part, and I think there's another part, it opens up the next week for you. So know that. But then when you get to week 5, it's going to pause you, because we've kind of set the curriculum up in 5 weeks of instruction segments. I'm not saying that well, but I think you understand. It's 5 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 weeks, and then our final week is how I've got Teachable set up, opening, dripping to you. Yeah, that didn't make sense. Okay, thank you.
I wasn't using active listening. I'm going to be honest.
That's okay. Earlier there was a spider coming down from the ceiling in front of us, and I zoned out for a little bit because I couldn't decide if I needed to get up and get it. Was it coming our direction?
Did he go away?
Yeah, he went back up.
Okay.
He's behind the light up there. Anyway.
Oh, gee, I know. Like, save the spiders yet. They are.
Okay, I have the nail.
Yes, let's do that. And then maybe even, I was thinking the motorcycle. I don't know that being 7:30 if we want to dive in.
All right, I've got a little video that I want. Make sure I have the right one before I share my screen. Yes, I do. Okay, let me share screen.
So this is just a cute little video.
Yeah.
So you guys some of you may have seen it before.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it. in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way.
Yes. So even if you have a client and they have a nail sticking out of their head and they're talking about snagging their sweaters, you have to sit there and listen without trying to pull the nail out of their head.
It's so true though, right? Like, did you see her emotion shift when like he finally just said, wow, that must be hard. Yes. You know, I mean, it is amazing when we just, you know, don't try to fix it. Again, there's nothing wrong. We're not trying to fix anything. We're just listening and we're just being empathetic to the situation.
Yeah.
Versus, well, just, you know, maybe you stop snagging all your sweaters. Maybe you got the nail out of your.
Just pull the nail out of your head. Oh, funny. Anyway, a little comic relief to end all this lecture.
Yes.